Welcome to this episode. This is episode 7 when it comes to stewarding your online ministry. And in particular, this episode, we are looking at making donor communications simple and doable. So, we're looking at putting together a communication strategy for your donors that will actually drive engagement and increase in giving. So, if this is your first time here, welcome to this episode. And if you're coming back as a replay, then great to have you here as well. This episode is specifically for online ministry. So, you might be a content creator, Christian content creator, you might be a pastor, an evangelist, for example, and you have an online ministry. Perhaps you have a deliverance ministry, for example, and you have an online presence. So, we're going to look at donor communication. And you might be wondering, well, Amanda, what's prompted this particular episode? Well, what's prompted this particular episode is that often online ministries don't know where to start. So, for example, you're not sure where to start when it comes to putting together donor communications. So, when I say donor communications, simply what I'm referring to is writing to your donors, those who generously sow into your ministry, whether they give one time, whether they give regularly, whether they give monthly. So it's keeping in contact with them. And we're going to actually look at a strategy that you can map out. I've provided a visual for you so you can visually see what it looks like to map it out. So many online ministries, including those that I have sewed into and do so into, there are these gaps. There are many that are doing it really well, but this is for the online ministry that is not doing this or is doing this. So you may be doing this, but you're wanting to refine how often you communicate with your donors and improve that experience for the people that are sewing into your ministry. And we'll get into the reasons why that actually drives engagement and how that impacts increased giving, increased offerings into your ministry. So, like I said, it's not uncommon if you don't know where to start. I completely understand. The reason I know where to start is because my background is donor relations, it is fundraising. I've worked in the nonprofit sector here in Australia for 9 years. So, very much across uh, these concepts as well as actually implementing them. So, we're going to explore how to develop a robust donor communication strategy that drives engagement and increases giving. So, firstly, did you know, newsflash, your most loyal donors, the sowers, they're actually eager to hear from you and they're eager to share your message. Let's actually write AKA sowers, because these are the people who generously sow into your ministry. And the ones that sow into your ministry are your most loyal, most faithful, the ones that, yeah, sow into your ministry. And in previous episodes, we've looked at the reason why people sow into your ministry. So go back to previous episodes with regards to that. And we certainly do cover that in more detail. So the sowers, they're eager to hear from you and they're eager to hear you share your message and to keep in touch with them regularly. They may not have told you that, maybe they have, and you've ignored the feedback. But if you really want to grow a thriving online ministry and have an element of transparency, then I encourage you to implement these best practices. But firstly, it'll actually unlock kingdom finances. When you start to look at it as stewardship, so that biblical principle of stewarding, you're stewarding your time, you're stewarding your talents, you're stewarding your resources. This is something we touch on in pretty much each of these episodes. But stewardship of your community, of your donors, of the sowers, those that are sowing into your ministry, steward them. And we're going to come up with a strategy on how you can do that from a macro perspective, so that overview. And when you do, you're actually going to turn your sowers into powerful advocates for your ministry. when they're well taken care of, when they're stewarded correctly, and we've got strategies around how to do that and what that looks like, they're going to become powerful advocates for your online ministry. So they're going to actively share on other platforms what it's like being a monthly supporter, for example. They're going to share that in conversations. They may share that on their socials. It really does unlock kingdom finances. And when I say they become powerful advocates, and we'll get into the flip side later, but the flip side of that is when you don't steward your donors, they will actually share their experiences in conversations where appropriate on YouTube channels. I saw this recently for a well-known online ministry with over 900,000 subscribers, and someone openly planted on another channel their experience as a monthly partner, where they were sewing regularly in, and it was not a credible comment. And this is someone that was sewing financially into that ministry. It did actually confirm and or validate my own observations, and a number of trainings are centered around those case studies. And that particular ministry I have reached out directly to via email, via letter, like literally in the mail, in the post, and also via DM with some of these trainings as additional pieces for them, just to show what it looks like and the impact. So it does actually unlock kingdom finances when you steward the sowers, the people that are sowing into your ministry, and they become powerful advocates, ambassadors of your ministry, and they may even encourage others and or inspire others to sow into your ministry through what they share about their experience. And looking at, with your donor communication strategy, innovation, like even with budget constraints, you might be like, hey Amanda, I'm literally like a one-person show. It's myself and my spouse, myself and my husband, myself and my wife, for example. It may simply just be the two of you. And so I understand that you may have limited resources at this time. But by implementing this strategy, it's actually going to unlock kingdom finance. It's going to really demonstrate to your community that you are a steward, and you're stewarding for the kingdom of God. So don't let limited resources hinder your ability to communicate with donors. So whether that's just the two of you, for example, maybe it's just yourself, don't let that stop you from writing to your donors. And we're going to explore really cost-effective ways. And these practices are inspired by donor relations and the fundraising sector and the nonprofit. Because when you start an online ministry, chances are this is all new to you. And so look to the nonprofits, those that, for example, even charities that you may have given offerings and donations to, their communication. And you'll start to see, well, hey, these sorts of practices I absolutely can implement into my own ministry as a way of stewardship, because the principles are the same. Yes, there's differences in nuances with a nonprofit and a nonprofit that is faith-based. So, for example, what we're talking about here, Christian online ministries, there's going to be some nuances, but the principles are generally the same. They are at the foundation. And so coming back to stewardship, it's a biblical principle in terms of what it looks like in donor relations and fundraising. It's simply donor stewardship, which is actually about cultivating the relationship. So what is a donor communication strategy? You might be like, I've landed on this episode. Just tell me what it is, Amanda. So at its core, a donor communication strategy is a structured plan that outlines regular communication that you have with your donors. So I want you to think of it as like you're mapping out your content calendar, and it's specifically for your donor engagement, and the flow-on effect is increased giving from your donors. So think of it like your content calendar. You're going to map it out like that. And so when you start to see the similarities, like, oh yeah, of course. Well, when I map out my content, when I plan my content, I can do planning for communicating with my donors. Whether you do that at the same time or on a different day, that's completely up to you. But the concept, I want you to look at the concept, and the principles are the same. It just looks a little bit different visually, and that's what I'm going to step you through. Because with this episode, I was prompted to actually share a visual rather than just going through an episode without a visual of what it actually looks like or what it can look like. So before we get into the visual, I just want you to really consider what is the cost of inaction. So with you not communicating with your donors, with you not writing to your sowers, with you not sending out regular emails and communications, this is costing you. Like, I'll be honest with you, it's costing you donors. So donors are being neglected, they're disengaged, it's leading to decreased financial support. So donors are dropping off, it's damaging to your reputation. So the example I gave before, where I saw on someone's platform, someone had openly commented about their experience as a monthly supporter with a very big, for context, deliverance ministry. And so that comment really did validate some of the concerns that I had, or blind spots that I'd noticed in terms of their donor stewardship, which, as I've shared with you before, I've reached out and haven't heard anything back. But it actually impacts your reputation. So that does take place in terms of conversations, comments, and or, people may not share it, but they simply disconnect, they tap out, they discontinue their giving. From that is dissatisfied donors. So there's aspects of frustration because they've simply been uninformed and or unappreciated. You're simply not thanking them. You're not keeping in touch. I'll be honest with you, you're absolutely okay with receiving their financial support, but you're not stewarding them. You're not, stewarding that relationship with your community. And it goes beyond simply creating content. This is something that's just prompted by the Holy Spirit to share with you right now. I actually did pray before this episode. And so it goes beyond your content, keeping in touch with your donors. Like, yes, you can do more live streams and create more content and, circulate that and, be online regularly. But this is different. They're two different things. Yes, you're serving your community through creating content, doing live streams, doing Q&As, doing podcast episodes, or having interviews on your channel and being on your channel. You're still serving your community, and you're stewarding them in this way. But this, when it comes to donor stewardship, we're talking about stewarding those that are financially investing into your ministry, the kingdom of God, those that are financially sowing, those that are giving offerings, those that are signing up for regular financial gifts. It's about stewarding them, and stewarding your sowers looks different to and is separate to you serving your community through content. This was just a really big distinction that I wanted to share with you. That was prompted just to share with you, so you'll see that it's visually not on the slides, but it is a difference. There is a difference between, actually I'll add it while we're here. Let's do that. Distinction between content, stewarding, hang on, let's say serving. That's actually what came through in the insight that I shared with you. There's a distinction between serving your community through your content. I wouldn't say versus, but let's just sort of like versus / compared to stewarding the sowers, which are the people, the donors who give financially into your ministry. Let's go with they invest. They do invest into your ministry. This is super important. When you understand this, you're just like, oh, okay, they're two separate things, Amanda. I get what you're talking about. And I completely understand that this takes time. It's an awareness piece, it's education, It comes to me easily because it's what I've been doing for the last 9 years, a big aspect of my role. And then the Lord showed me after being saved and born again to really share this more online and specifically with online ministry. So that's sort of a bit of a backstory there. I'll put it in a different color. So there's a distinction between serving your community through your content versus compared to stewarding the sowers, aka those generous or cheerful givers who invest financially into your ministry. Like they're just two different things. They are separate and different. And when you recognize that for what it is, it's actually going to help you take action. You're like, okay, there's a difference. There's a difference between my content plan and my communication plan with my donors. Okay, awesome. I can do this then and do that then. So it's actually going to help you. So these are two different functions. These are two different functions and forms of stewardship and serving. Exactly. So that was an additional one for what it actually costs you. It's more of that understanding. Loss of community. So when you're not stewarding your sowers, those that donate, those that give offerings, the people that sow into your ministry, you're actually collapsing your community. You're not communicating with them. You're not really developing a sense of community. It weakens that sense of community. It simply just disappears. And there's no sense of belonging for your supporters. Yes, they may feel well served on your platform when you go going back to that distinction between content and stewarding your donors. They feel well taken care of in terms of your creating content, sharing testimonies. You're doing you've got interviews, guest interviews, all of that. You're serving them there, but you're not serving them in terms of community when it comes to those that are financially investing into sowing into your ministry. And let's be honest, and I'm going to be honest with you, it actually comes across, whether you recognize that or not, that it's actually about you rather than your community. So when you're not communicating with your donors, it's actually there's a very big focus on you, whether you're aware of that. So that might come as a surprise. That might be a bit of a shock to hear. That it might be like, oh, ouch. Yeah, I see what you mean. Even though that's not the purpose and mission of your ministry, the perception, the experience from your donors is actually about you rather than a community that is on a mission to save lives, to have people's lives impacted, to have people baptized, delivered, for example, awareness, whatever it is for your particular ministry, evangelism, for example. But yeah, it becomes about you. So there's an element of, I guess, self-reliance. There's a element of pride. There's an element of idols. So yeah, there's no sense of community when you're not communicating with those who sow into your ministry. And it's more than the shout outs on your live streams. I know you'll hear me say this a lot, and it's something that I'm super passionate to educate and bring to the awareness of Christian content creators and those with online ministries. Yes, absolutely have a call to action on your live streams. Like, I don't have a problem with that. Like, that's a big part of stewarding an online ministry. But when you're only thanking your donors on a live stream and only thanking those that sow in the moment, like, oh, yes, uh, Jenny Jones, for example. Oh, awesome. Thank you so much, Jenny Jones, for sewing into the ministry. Really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for your generous gift. Like, absolutely thank Jenny Jones and thank those that sew in online. But what about those that are sewing already? Like, what are you doing there? So that's where it really does start to, this is where it all starts to kind of come together, and you're like, oh, okay, I can see the connection points, the loss of community, how it can impact your reputation, how you can lose donors, people stop giving, they're dissatisfied. That's where this all starts to interplay. And quite simply, when you don't communicate with your donors, those that sow into your ministry, you will lose income. Like, you'll lose monthly reoccurring income through your monthly supporter, monthly partners program, and you're going to simply lose income from those who give when they're prompted to give, and or for the other reasons that they give. So there's an impact on an income stream there because you're not stewarding the people that are sowing into your ministry. So in terms of donor relations language, it reduces their engagement. So the people that are sowing into your ministry, they've simply tapped out. They're disengaged. They may feel frustrated, unappreciated, uninformed, and you're like, well, Amanda, it's not about feelings. I get that. It's not, but that's actually acknowledging their experience. So from a customer service perspective and donor stewardship, yeah, they're frustrated, they're annoyed. They may even be offended because maybe they've tried to contact you multiple times. So when you start to implement a donor communication strategy and you stick with it, then that's going to increase engagement. They're going to be, ambassadors for you. You might be like, hey, man, I've got people shouting me out online already. And you probably have, like, for sure. But what I noticed too, and this is where my gift of discernment comes in, is, and this is quite bold to say, but I have shared it before, is people are doing that because of their own experience and their testimony. Absolutely. So is that group. But there's also a high volume of people that are doing it for your attention. They want your attention. And the reason they're seeking your attention is because you're missing this. You're simply missing this fundamental piece of stewarding. If you simply stewarded your donors and communicated with them and thanked them regularly and acknowledged them and shared the impact, then they wouldn't be all online going, hey, look at me. Hey, thanks, help. You know, they would still absolutely give you shout outs and recommendations. But there's a big part of it where you're missing the bigger picture there. And yes, it's very bold to say that, but I'm just being honest with you so that you can start to see where this actually plays into your ministry and how you can steward the people that are coming into your ministry. And so let's dive into a visual example of what it looks like. So we've covered a lot. To recap, we've uncovered that it will unlock kingdom finances, that you can go beyond your budget constraints and do it really simply, which we're going to go through. At the visual, we've talked about what a donor communication strategy actually is, what the cost of inaction cost you in terms of losing donors, the impact on your reputation, dissatisfied donors, a loss of community, and a loss of income. We've also spent time, prompted by the Holy Spirit, praise the Lord, that there's a difference between serving your community online with your content creation and serving and stewarding those who sow financially. They're two separate functions in your online business and ministry. And when you get that, when that lands for you, this will just be a breeze. So the visual, what I want you to look at doing, and you can set it up however you like, but I wanted to run through a visual so you can be like, okay, great, I sort of know what I need to be focusing on. And if it's something that you want help with or you have additional questions, then by all means, reach out. So visually, we want to look at the month, the audience, the purpose, the activity, and your call to action. So this example simply goes from January to March. So let's start with January. I like to put the month first because then you're like, okay, it's numerical, it's methodical. You could have the activities, but just depending on how you visually like to see it, I like to start with the month. Audience. So we're looking at segmenting your group, dividing them up into subgroups. In some of the other episodes, we've gone into that in more detail. So let's look at your monthly partners. You might be like, Amanda, I've got 5. Fabulous. You've got 5. Let's start thanking those 5. So in January, there's some other ones for January. So just to give you some context there. So let's look at your monthly donors, those people that are sewing in each month. The purpose of sending an impact report is it's showing gratitude for the impact of their giving. It keeps them engaged and it builds trust. So that's the purpose of doing it. And it will actually prevent people from dropping off, from stopping. There will always still be people that stop and make adjustments to their monthly giving as being a monthly partner. Of course, financial circumstances change, but it will reduce the attrition rate. It'll have an impact. So what I want you to look at doing, if you're watching this in January 2025, if you're watching it, whenever you're watching it, I want you to look at introducing an impact report. Now, you can do that at the beginning of the year. You can do it every month, every quarter. Just to begin with, just start with bringing it in. Let's start with once, but we'll look at other ways you can communicate with your donors. So an impact report for the year before. So you want to go back and look at the incredible moves that God has made through your ministry. You want to go back through your data and you want to put together a summary and go back to previous episodes where I give you specific examples of what you can put into an impact report. And I will also create a specific episode on impact reporting. But an impact report is simply sharing the impact of your ministry. So the impact that, the moves God's made, the blessings, the lives impacted, the souls saved, the number of baptisms, the number of evangelistic events, countries impacted. Just giving you an example bundle there. So share the impact of the year before. Celebrate and acknowledge your monthly partners because they've sowed into your ministry, whether they've sowed in for 3 months, 6 months, the full year. Thank them. Share those metrics and testimonies, what people have shared with you, whether that's directly through your messages, whether it's through the comment section on your channels, but do that. So look at having an impact report for your monthly partners to show gratitude, to keep them engaged, to build trust, and share those metrics and testimonies. So that's one activity. It's very broad. Now, the call to action is just simply to invite them to share their feedback. So with an impact report, look, you can ask for a gift, but I generally encourage you to just simply ask them for their feedback, what they've enjoyed about the year, why they give to your ministry, or just encourage a conversation. And from that, if they decide to give, they do. Because not with every communication, you're not necessarily going to be asking your donors to give. There's other ways that you can engage them. And an impact report is simply a celebration of all the milestones and the moves that God's made through your ministry. So encouraging that conversation. So that's for your monthly partners, for example. To all your donors, this is for January, for example, look at having a monthly milestone newsletter. Same concept, welcome in the new year. And the purpose of this is to deliver thanks and acknowledgement and to share blessings. So you're going to send that to all your donors. You're going to have some that you send just to your monthlies, those that give on a monthly regular basis, and this is then to everyone who gives, for example. Another activity. So 3 activities for January, your monthly partners, your all donors, and let's look at birthdays. Like, you'll be able to get that information potentially through what they've shared, and you can simply send e-cards for birthdays. You may even write some birthday cards and send them. You may do that for some of your overseas donors. It's completely up to you, but trial and test that. People will let you know if they want to receive a birthday card or not. It's simply a form of engagement. That's the whole purpose of doing it. And let's write that in because I did. Oh, yes, I did. It's for engagement. And people do appreciate that. Like, taking examples from the nonprofit space, over the years, I've had so many donors get in touch with me and thank me for the cards that I've sent. Birthday cards, they write cards back. This is a older demographic, but people do appreciate that. Or they'll thank you in an email. They may even ring up. It's obviously different, but through online, but I've also had donors who then make a gift, like as in a financial gift. Doesn't happen all the time, and that's totally okay. It's a simple form of engagement. So that's what you're looking at doing with donor communications. It's engagement, and with that, at times and in time, increasing giving. So there are your 3 activities for the beginning of the year. For example, you can implement this anytime, but your monthly partners, an impact report, all donors, a monthly milestones newsletter, and all donors birthday cards for that. And then start looking at those that are already giving. You can start to see when their birthdays are and map that out. So, for example, February, look at your first time givers. So, those who it's their first time that they've sowed into your ministry, and acknowledge that. You can put together an email and simply send it to those donors and simply thank them for being first time sowers. Give them thanks, share some testimonies. Perhaps people have shared with you why they started giving to your ministry. So you can share that in your email communication. It's simply encouragement and gratitude. With that one as well, with first time givers, invite them to share why they started to sow. Some will share that with you and already have, but it opens up that conversation. Can you see what's starting to happen here? We're actually opening up a community. We're stewarding the community. We're keeping in contact with them. We're really starting to understand who our community is, those that sow. There'll be people that you'll never hear from, but they're happily so into your ministry. And that's always the case. There's always a group of sowers, donors that are motivated that way. But then you've also got to look at the rest of your community. People give for different reasons. So you need to factor in that and start to have a plan for your communication. So look at your first time givers. Those that are the first time that they've given, acknowledge them, share testimonies with them and ask them to share theirs with yours. Another activity, so Feb, for example, too, you're all donors and monthly milestones. So I want you to get into the habit of monthly milestones via email to your community. You might be like, hey, Amanda, I create a post at the end of each month and I have pictures and I write in that. That is awesome. Like, absolutely. You could actually repurpose what you've written in your content feed, put it into an email, put in the pictures. You might want to add a bit more because it's an email. You may not. It's completely up to you. But what I encourage you to do, I was almost going to say what I want you to do, but really encourage you, instruct you, prompt you to do is to get into the habit of monthly newsletters. And by all means, repurpose content. Like, absolutely. Your call to action, it can be to ask for a gift. It may be an invitation to join the monthly partners program. Now, if you're sending it to all donors, you do want to be aware that if you're asking them to join the monthly program, that there's going to be some monthly donors that you're sending that to. So you want to be aware of who's in the group, like not necessarily individually, you may, for sure, particularly just starting and growing your ministry. But there'll be slightly different calls to action. So I'll put that separately. So monthly milestones, look at implementing that each month, repurposing what you're already doing on your front lines, put it into an email and steward those who are financially sowing into your ministry. March, all donors. So say, for example, you've got a giving campaign coming up for Lent, coming up for Easter, then start to introduce that to your community and invite them to be champions. Can you start to see what's happening as you are starting to communicate with them, your community, and steward them? This is going to bring in that ambassador, this community. It's just going to start to flow. The invitations and the encouragements to be involved will yield results. It will be fruitful. It may take a little bit of time, and it may even happen quickly because chances are, if you haven't communicated with any of them or with them as a group collectively, that behind the scenes, then there'd be many that be like, oh, wow, thanks so much. Like, they'll reach out and let you know. So in March, for example, introduce your giving, giving campaign for Lent for Easter, and invite your donors, your sowers, to be involved and to promote it for you. Because as you're communicating with them, they're going to want to become ambassadors. They're being connected, they're being acknowledged, they're being thanked, they're being recognized. It's without, frustration. It's without ignoring them. It's without neglecting them. So it's going to be so much easier for you to start to steward your online ministry this way and grow engagement and increase in financial giving. The other activity for March, like I said, this is simply a 3-month one, is look at doing a survey for all your donors. No, actually, this example, you can do it for all yours, but let's look at doing a survey, for example, let's do both, or all donors. The example that I've given is actually for your monthly partners, those that have cancelled. If they haven't already provided you with direct feedback, you could get back in touch with them through a survey and ask them for their feedback. If you're wanting help with survey questions, I'll be developing another episode on that, and or reach out directly and we can look at ways I can support you with that. Ask them for feedback, like literally, just call it something simple like survey, we're listening. We're listening is very different, or I'm listening if it's simply just yourself, but we're listening is really like, oh, well, they want to hear from me. They'll provide you feedback. And then your responsibility is to action that feedback and to give them updates on where things are with that. So your call to action is simply to fill in the survey. You may offer an incentive for those first, X number of people to fill in the survey will receive whatever you have. Maybe you have merchandise. Yeah, you may offer an incentive such as merchandise. So perhaps you've got merchandise, whether it's been selling or not, that's completely other conversation, but you may offer an incentive for people that fill it in within, I don't know, 3 days, for example, 5 days, merchandise. That's going to encourage people to fill it in. You're going to get feedback. You're going to get ideas for improvement. You're going to hear what's working well. Like, look at feedback as well, what's working well, why they give, what inspired them to. They're going to start to share that more with you. So, yeah, offer some merchandise, for example. So that is simply 3 months. You can tailor it the way you want to, but I wanted to give you a visual example of a donor communication strategy so that you can see it's simply putting it into a table, into a spreadsheet, having these areas, the month, the audience, the purpose, the activity, and or the name of it, and a call to action. So what you're asking from that, and simply mapping it out at a high level and then actually doing that. So that is the visual from it. So example list of activities that you can bring into your donor communication strategy that we've talked about and discussed is a donor newsletter. So every month, really want to encourage you to do it monthly. You can do it every 2 weeks if you want, bi-weekly, but monthly for those that are financially sowing into your ministry. Supportive feedback, you might look at doing that bi-yearly, so twice a year. Supportive feedback, make sure you respond. Make sure you ask for feedback and then do nothing about it, then are you really stewarding your community? You want to send thank you emails and impact reports monthly. Look at birthday cards, and that would be probably e-cards and or postal to overseas donors, if you've got their details, of course. You may also, supporter feedback, thank yous, impact report, birthday cards, for example. There was something else, and Yeah, your giving campaigns, what's coming up. So look at that as some activities of what you can communicate with them. First time givers. Those are the first time givers and monthly partners. You want specific communications for them. So action item, love to leave you with an action item. So I want you to review last month's donor communication plan. If you're like, Amanda, I didn't even have one. I just sent out some emails. Well, review that. If you're like, Amanda, I didn't even send any emails other than what was auto-generated from the system, which is thank yous and receipts. Well, I want you to review that and go, okay, go back through this episode, whether you've taken notes, just come back to the episode and go, okay, let's look back over the donor communication strategy that Amanda's visually provided there. What can I start to do? And look at these examples and go, okay, I didn't do them, but what can I implement going forward? And then map out a calendar of a schedule. So a calendar schedule for your donor communication. So monthly, and then you might have 3 activities to 5's plenty, but somewhere between 3 and 5 or up to 5 each month. Keep it simple, aim for about 3. That's easy. And, start to do that as well. And that will really give you a good grip and handle on what you're doing with your communications. It's going to build community. It's going to drive engagement. It's going to lead to increased giving. People will give, even if you actually want to track that, like track. I'll pop that down actually. That's an idea. Yeah. Track your giving levels. So those that have sewed into, track your giving levels before you implemented a donor communication strategy and to implementing one. So it's simply before and after. It's before and after. I want you to actually look at the financial giving levels into your ministry. I want you to track it. Track it over 1 year. You may start to see changes within like 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, but track it over a year. You're like, hey, Amanda, I didn't write to my community. No worries. Let's begin. You've got a strategy that you could begin with. Map it out, implement it, and just put in how much you were receiving, whether it's each month or for year to date, and then just be across that. You'll start to see that. You'll just notice some shifts, and that's just an example that you can do. You don't have to, but I encourage you to, particularly if you're like, wow, I'd really love to see more people sewing into my ministry. Well, start stewarding those that are already sewing into the ministry, and we've gone through ways that you can do that activity. So if you found this helpful, comment below and or share this episode with a colleague. Maybe you know someone that has an online ministry. Share it with them, share this resource, send them the link, and it will help them get started. So thanks so much. It's been great to connect with you, and I really look forward to hearing how it all goes.